So we're going to talk about making the top portion. We want to make sure that we have a 3/4 inch overhang on the sides as well as the front. The back will be flush. So when we're doing it, we're going to measure the case here, including the face frame, and we're going to add 1 3/4 inches to the length and only 3/4 to the width. To do that, you're going to probably have to glue 2 boards together. In this case, we glued 2 boards so that we can get enough width for our case. You might be able to find a board that's wide enough, but more than likely everybody's going to need to glue something up. Once we have the sub base done, then we can go ahead and put the top. The top is going to be the exact same width and length of the case here with the face frame included. More than likely you should be able to have leftover from the case build, and that should work perfectly for that. My first cut here, I'm going to be taking off this stained groove. Then I'm going to go ahead and set it up for my 5 7/8, and I'll rip the sub top. Set up for the top cut, 3/8 inch material, 5 1/8. Have my good edge up against the fence. We cut this to the width we need. Now we need to cut it to the length. A good habit to get into is just take a small cut on the end to make sure that it is square to the edges. Now that we have that cut, we can measure over 10 1/2. Make sure you mark on what side you want the blade to end up on. Line it up. There's our sub base. Cut it to the appropriate length. Remember, on the router, you want your best side down. So I want this side, I want it down. We're always going to do the end grain first, and we're going to back it up. Double check to make sure you have good edges before you move on. It's easier to recut now than before you set it up. Again, check, it looks good. So we have the sub base in the top. What you're going to need to glue this together is obviously glue. You're going to need clamps. If you're worried about your clamp denting your top surface, we can get some cauls. I'm going to go ahead and glue this together and come back, but we want to make sure that we don't get so much glue that it squeezes out. The top is glued. I went around and made sure I didn't have any squeeze out, so I'm going to go ahead and put this underneath the glue table and start working on the base. We are ready to glue the top on. You want to make sure that it is flush with the back, not flush with this short board. So you want to make sure that it gets flush here and flush over here as well. It will have a little spot that the backer board will fit into. Clamp from the back. What you do not want to do is you do not want to clamp from the front, because you will grab this front and squeeze it. It'll pop these joints apart and you'll have to go back and start over on the face frame. Now we have the base going together. I'm going to start with the 1¼ inch, and I'm going to need to run it on 3 sides. We're going to have a miter here and a miter here, square cuts in the back. We want to make sure that we have the clock sitting on enough of this that'll support it and that we can glue it to it. So you can't have it too far away, otherwise we don't have enough support, and you definitely do not want it overhanging the design. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple of miters on these, just a rough size, and then we'll fine tune it. So what I've done here is I did a rough cut on 2 side pieces, and I did a rough cut on the front. I taped the miter to keep it tight. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to line up the frame point with that miter, and then I can come back here and I can mark exact length that I want and cut it off flush. So I'll be cutting that flush, and I'll repeat the process on the other side as well. I got the back of it trimmed flush. I've got the corner lined up with the face frame corner. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to mark right off of this corner where I want my miter to be. I have an even gap all the way across the front and across the side. Okay, so we cut that. If you're worried about length, you can always leave it a little bit long and trim it down to fit. Now that I have this one ready, I'm going to grab some glue and some nails, and we're going to put it together for good. All right, so I applied some glue in there and put it together and held it with my hands for a count of 10. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to use the brad nailer, and I'm going to put in 2 nails from the side. Make sure you get in straight so they don't come out the front or the back, but only from the side, that way we can't see them, and we'll do it to both of these. Go ahead and clamp the bases up. Make sure that if you do get squeeze out, that you do remove it. It'll be easier now rather than later. What we're looking at here is we've got the clock upside down. What we're going to do is we're going to add in some structural support. I just cut a few of these little triangles. You're going to put some glue on the short sides, and you'll just push it in there to help reinforce the base to the case. If you look back here, since this is going to be short, a 1/16 of an inch or so, we end up with a gap there. So to fill that gap in, we're going to take a scrap from some of our previous cutoffs. We will glue that down in there. We can also take some of these little triangles and reinforce the front. If you're worried about the material not staying while the glue dries, you can go ahead and use a headless pin nail, and that will allow us to keep it in there till the glue dries. Next step is we're going to put in the spacers to keep the face of the clock off of the face frame. They're made out of 1/8 inch material. I will have that cut because I cannot use the guard. You'll put one here on the right, glue it in place, and you'll put one over here on the left side. Next step in the process is we need to create the back of the clock face, and it needs to fit inside the case, right, left, up and down. And then we're going to cut the backer board that's going to sit in this groove or the rabbet and overhang down here a little bit. So we need to make sure we cut the pieces lengthwise first, and then we can rip them to length. I cut my clock face out, so that should be able to slip down in there and up against the stops. I also have my backer cut. That should fit in the rabbet all the way around. And what we have there is all the pieces needed to finish it up.